What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? How are you all doing today? And welcome to episode 10 of Talkin Track. I'm your host, Armando DePaul, the voice of FMU Athletics and writer for the Daily Downforce, and of course, the host of this fantastic show. Already 10 episodes in. I'm just so thankful for everyone that's been tuning in for the past couple months and the past couple weeks. So today we got a pretty interesting episode for you guys. We got no race weekend roundup for you today. Not enough races, in my opinion. I didn't get a chance to watch the IndyCar doubleheader. I was too busy doing some work with the Downforce in terms of NASCAR, watching the Xfinity and the Cup races. Just didn't get the opportunity, so we're going to have no race weekend roundup this time around. However, we will make sure to bring that back for you guys next episode. So today we're going to talk about some F1, a little bit of NASCAR, and it's going to be a great time. So without any further ado, let's dive right in. All right, I'm going to start off with giving this week's Speedway Spotlight to Red Bull Racing. And I'm going to start off our Speedway Spotlight by saying that, we're in an election year. So politics, unfortunate for most of us, is taking over our lives once again. I mean, when you're going to decide who the next president of the United States is going to be, makes sense. But politics just doesn't exist every 4 years or every election turnaround or anytime a new law has to be made. Politics is all around us in every aspect of the world. I mean, you don't believe me? Let's say there's something going on in your personal life. Let's say your job or your career or, a team. And something happens that you don't really understand as to why it's going on. For lack of a better term, it makes no sense. You feel like, well, why don't we just do it this way? It would be better than we did it the other way. The typical answer is it's because of politics. I mean, politics exists around all around. It's basically the default way of saying why we do something that makes absolutely no sense or why something's happening that makes absolutely no sense. And to me, I was originally going to make this segment about F1 as a whole. However, looking more into it, I see that this is more of a problem, and yes, this is a problem, that's more specific to Red Bull rather than F1 as a whole. And let me tell you exactly what I mean. What should be the point of fielding a team in anything? It doesn't have to be about racing at this specific moment. It could be soccer, football, you name it. The goal of the team should be to field the best players that you can find or the best recruits that you can obtain to field the best team possible. That should be the goal of a team, right? And for the most part, that is what's the goal of every team. You go for the best talent possible. But Red Bull doesn't do that. What Red Bull does is they go for one of the best talents possible, and then they go for a middle-of-the-road talent that's not going to, make conflict, that's not going to threaten the top talent. I'm pretty sure you F1 fans have heard the cycle in the news that there's a chance that Sergio Perez could be dropped from his Red Bull seat after the summer break, which is coming up in the next couple of weeks. And look, it has not been a good season for Sergio. He's like 6th in the standings. I don't even think he's finished on the podium in like 2-3 months. And in what should be the best car on the grid, he's looking like Lance Stroll out there. That's how bad he's been. So the rumor going around is that he is out. He's going to be out at the end of the summer break, despite just signing a contract extension. Although we know with Red Bull and contracts, those mean absolutely nothing. So who are the candidates out there that could replace Sergio Perez? There's 3 options that are going out there. There's Yuki Tsunoda, Daniel Ricciardo, and Liam Lawson. Lawson is one of their development drivers. He's been in the Red Bull pipeline for a couple of years, and you might have known if you watched last year, he did make a couple starts with the at the time AlphaTauri, now Racing Bulls team. So he does have some experience in F1 cars, and he did impress. He was supposed to be lined up for a seat last year. That didn't happen, and he's trying to get lined up for a seat this year with or without Red Bull. Then you got Yuki Tsunoda, who's had a fantastic season. It took him a little bit of time to figure it out in F1, but now that he's beaten Daniel Ricciardo. He's looked like the best driver out of the midfield if we take out the top 4 teams, and he has done pretty much everything he could to get a Red Bull seat. He has done everything well. He's scored the points. He's been in position. He has outqualified his teammate. He has beaten his teammate. And he has been the bright spot. He has been the second best Red Bull driver this year. He's been better than Sergio, and he's been better than Daniel. And let's move on to Daniel. At the beginning of the season, it was rough. He looked like a shell of his former self. He looked like he was out to lunch. However, the past couple races, he has started to pick up the pace. He has started to get a lot closer with his teammate, and he's finally started to score some points finishes. So Ricardo, he started the year horribly, but now he's finally getting his foot under him, and he now looks like, I'm not going to say the Daniel Ricciardo we've known for years, but he looks like he should be on the F1 grid, if that makes any sense. He looks like he's a competent F1 driver. So I just listed you those three options. Would you be surprised if I told you that Red Bull's probably going to go with Ricardo over Yuki Tsunoda? Now, I know what a lot of you are probably thinking. Those of you in F1 are thinking. It's because Daniel's raced with Red Bull before. It's because they got data on Daniel. It's because Daniel's a race winner. Yuki hasn't even finished on the podium. The thing about sports is, it's not about, or what it should be, is it's not what you've done for me before, it's what you've done for me now. And that's life in general as well. Great. You won all those races 5-6 years ago. What have you done since? You got nearly kicked out of F1. If Nick DeVries was even 10% better, Daniel would still be out of the sport. And now he's slated to get a Red Bull seat when he's done nothing? Yeah, he broke his wrist. Guess what? Carlos Sainz had an appendix surgery and won the next week. So what's the excuse? But you know what it is? It's politics. When you start saying, oh, look what he's done in the past, now you're playing the political game. You're not rewarding someone off merit. You're not choosing someone off merit. You're choosing them because something that makes absolutely no sense. Oh, you got data on Daniel. Great. Your last data on Daniel was in a previous generation car. Oh, you have data on Daniel. When was the last time he's finished on the podium or finished top 10 in points? Oh, you have data on Daniel. What's his record against Yuki Tsunoda this year? But they don't want to give Yuki the seat because they don't think he's worth anything, or maybe because they're salty at Honda for, maybe, dare I say, dropping them or leaving the sport. So maybe they're salty at Honda. They're like, nah, okay, you're going to do that to us. We're not going to promote your driver. And that's why they're switching to Ford. So they're like, all right, we're getting rid of these guys. We're leaving these guys anyway in the next few years. Why are we going to promote their driver? It's all politics. I'd even accept it more if it was Liam Lawson, because, all right, you're just giving a guy seat time. And regardless, I think if Sergio leaves, then Liam's going to be there in a Racing Bulls or in a Red Bull. I think regardless. But it's probably going to end up being Daniel. Why? Because of politics. And Red Bull plays the politic game. This is where I'm going back to the beginning. They don't look for the best drivers. They look for okay to average drivers that aren't going to threaten Max Verstappen. They want a driver that can just pick up the pieces, isn't going to contend for anything, is basically content with giving away any hopes of a championship just so they could be Max Verstappen's wingman. And they use the allure of, it's the best car on the grid. You could get podiums. If you're lucky and Max wrecks out, you could get a win. On paper, racing for Red Bull sounds like a dream come true. You can race for a championship, or can you? You can race for wins, or can you? You can race to be one of the best, or can you? Because you see, the team isn't going to prioritize any other driver over Max Verstappen. If Daniel thinks he even has a shot at competing with Max, I don't think he would anyway, because he's just not that driver, but he's living in a dream. Red Bull would rather do anything to keep Max happy. And of course, Max, he doesn't want a teammate that's going to threaten him. Or does he? He's had that for most of his career. It wasn't only until recent, well, for the past 6 years he hasn't, but for the first half he did. And he and Daniel were getting along great. Once Daniel left, I think you really started seeing the politics of Red Bull start to take over. Because we know, ever since 2019, Red Bull have been trying to find a second driver to complement Max. Serge has been the longest tenured. And he's won a couple races, got a couple podiums. At the beginning, he did his job. But as we got into these new regulations, and as the car got more and more developed to Max's liking, he looks just as bad as Gasly and Albon did out there. And that is Red Bull's problem. That's another thing with the politics. Because you see, folks, politics isn't just trying to get to a goal through dubious means. It's also, the end result is kind of just, yeah, what did you expect to happen? I mean, folks, if your boss, let's say you have a teammate at a job, and your boss twists all the rules, the regulations, everything to support your teammate, and basically doesn't even want your opinion on anything, and then you struggle because it doesn't suit you, and then your boss threatens to fire you. That doesn't seem fair, does it? Red Bull constantly put these drivers in the cars to see if they can even compete with Max or even, fight at the top. Well, when you have a car that's 100% designed towards Max's driving style, which is a unique driving style, and then no one else can adapt to it, what do? They throw the drivers to the wayside. Now they're about to bring Daniel back just to do the same thing. You could say, oh, Daniel's experienced in Red Bull. Oh, great. You're going to bring one of the drivers who is incapable of adapting to a new car on the grid? And you're going to tell him basically sink or swim? I guarantee you, if he doesn't succeed, they're going to do the same thing. It's a constant cycle. I mean, at some point, folks, we got to stop blaming the drivers. Because guess what? Before Sergio got to Red Bull, he was a top 5 driver in the sport. Before Gasly got into the Red Bull, he had a really solid rookie year. And before Albon got into the Red Bull, he also was having a solid rookie year. But because they put him in a car that only 1 out of 8 billion people on the planet can drive, what do you think is going to happen? Of course they're not going to succeed. I mean, think about it, folks. Mercedes doesn't design their car around Lewis. Ferrari doesn't design their car around Leclerc. McLaren doesn't design their car around Lando. Now, granted, Max is a fantastic driver. Can you blame Red Bull for one designing their car around Max? No, because look what he's doing with it. He's winning 19 out of 23 races in a season. In a down year for the team, he's still leading the title by like 83 points, 84 points. So I don't blame them. So, you can't blame them really for it. You can't blame them for designing a car around Max. So then you can't blame the drivers the second driver when they don't succeed. So you'd think, okay, maybe if you're going to continue this formula of designing cars around Max, maybe you should go after the best talent available because they're more likely able to adapt to the new car that is wildly different and succeed. But they don't. Again, let me read off the list of who is likely going to get that Red Bull seat. Liam Lawson, Yuki Tsunoda, Daniel Ricciardo. In my opinion, Daniel is third on that list. I'll put Yuki first, Liam second, and Daniel third. And they're probably going to go with Daniel because he's the safe pick, because he's the political pick, because he's the guy who's not going to challenge Max. He's the guy they like him. We like Daniel, we want him back. Okay, I guarantee you this. If Daniel performs like Sergio's performed, what do you think is going to happen? I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. They're going to throw him to the wayside because it's all politics and it makes no sense. Like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't design a car that like one person on the planet could drive and then try to get a mediocre driver and expect him to do close to the same thing that Max does. You can't do that. Either don't design the car 100% around Max or get a driver that's close to Max's level so that he can adapt to the car. Because, folks, what has been Red Bull's... Because when Red Bull has gotten all these just mediocre drivers, they got Gasly, they got Albon. I mean, those two are mediocre nowadays, but at the time they were. Gasly, Albon, Perez. What did that cost them? Constructors' championships. I guarantee they had a better driver than Sergio in 2021. They would have won the Constructors. Yeah, they won it in 22 and 23, but that's because their car was so far ahead of everyone else that it didn't matter. Now their cars have been brought back to the means, and you see what's happening. It makes no sense. Again, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't design a car completely around Max and then hire a mid-level driver to run it and expect him to do fantastic. You can't expect the kid who gets B's every week to all of a sudden get an A+. You can't expect the kid who skips class constantly to show up on time. And you can't expect a driver who does not have anywhere near shape or form the same driving style as Max to immediately adapt to the car. I understand Formula One is all about adapting. You need to learn to adapt to be a good driver. But the team at some point has to help their driver as well. I mean, even when Lewis was dominating and Valtteri Bottas was the second driver, at least Mercedes gave Valtteri a chance at the beginning of every season. I mean, even at Ferrari, Leclerc's their golden boy, and they've never devalued Sainz. I mean, they're bringing Lewis in next year for crying out loud. Even McLaren, Lando Norris is their golden boy. They brought in one of the greatest F1 prospects in the past 10 years in Oscar Piastri. But Red Bull is solely around Max, and that's a problem. That's what's coming to bite them now. It's not that the drivers aren't really good enough. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. It's not the fact that the field is catching up, but it's not like I said, the drivers are catching up or the drivers aren't good enough. It's the fact that Red Bull play the political game of we need to appease Max and everyone else. It's like in politics. The politicians have to appease their donors more than anything else. Red Bull need to appease Max more than anything else. So they're going to design a car 100% around him, and then they're going to get drivers who aren't going to challenge him. And yeah, that can work when your car is 2 seconds faster than everyone else's. But what happens when you actually have a car that isn't that fast, that's closer to the rest of the field? That's when it all blows up in your face. And that's kind of what's happening with Red Bull. Max is struggling to compete now with Lando and McLaren and Mercedes, sometimes Ferrari, because he doesn't have a teammate that's on or near his level. Mercedes have it, McLaren has it, Ferrari has it, but Red Bull doesn't. And if they hire Ricciardo, it's going to be the same thing. Because Ricciardo's not on the level of Leclerc, Hamilton, Sainz, Piastri, Lando. It's going to be like Sergio never left. If you're going to play the political game, fine, do what you want. But if the result isn't what you're looking for, don't blame the target. Blame the system that you created. That's with Red Bull. I don't blame Pierre Gasly. I don't blame Alex Albon. I don't blame Sergio Perez for the struggles. I blame Red Bull for creating such a political environment that we're now seeing is going to blow up in their face. And it probably will blow up in their face again if they get Daniel in the seat. Okay, this one is going to be another controversial one. This is my podium perspective. Almost forgot to say that. Podium perspective for this week. And this is about the Brickyard 400. But more specifically, does NASCAR, do they really want the Brickyard 400? You might think that sounds crazy, that NASCAR may not want a crown jewel, that NASCAR may not want to race on the most historic racetrack on the planet in its most historic layout. And at the beginning, I thought the same thing. I'm like, why would anyone, I didn't even think of this. This wasn't even going to be a segment, to be honest with you. When I saw this tweet come out from SiriusXM NASCAR Channel 90 on X, and I'm going to read the quote for you here, where it talks about how track president for Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Doug Bowles, he came out saying that there's a suggestion that after the 2025 season, that there could be a rotation of the oval and the road course. Folks, I don't know if I've said this live or anything. I don't want the Brickyard 400, period. And most of you don't want the Brickyard 400 either. Let's be honest with ourselves. The Brickyard 400, it was a novelty back in the day. NASCAR coming to the famed Brickyard, 300,000 people coming, 80 plus cars trying to qualify. It was a novelty, but that novelty died back in the late 2000s. After that, it's just been terrible racing, dwindling crowds, horrible looks on television, and it's been a snoozer. And for the most part, fans have said that. Why do you think NASCAR took it off the schedule in the first place? Because it just wasn't working anymore. But as NASCAR fans typically do, they start complaining. They're saying, why are we on the road course? Like, this isn't prestigious enough. We want the Brickyard back, even though we were just complaining about it 5 minutes ago. So NASCAR brings the Brickyard back. It's actually going to come up this week. I'm going to go up to Orlando and see it with a friend of mine on Sunday. But my thing is, does NASCAR want it either? I mean, folks, if they were even suggesting the idea of rotating the oval and the road course, that tells me NASCAR and IMS, they're not confident that the Brickyard is going to sustain itself. They're not confident that this race will last much longer either. And can you blame them? Honestly. I mean, we just saw Pocono last week. Pocono's probably going to be the closest thing to Indianapolis. And it was fun seeing the strategy and everything play out, but the on-track product, the actual side-by-side racing aspect, was a snoozer. And I guarantee you we're going to see the same thing at IMS. And I know what everyone's going to say. Oh, the Brickyard 400, it's prestigious. Is it really prestigious? I mean, let's be honest here, folks. Is the Brickyard 400 really that prestigious? It wasn't prestigious enough to keep it on the schedule for 3 years. It wasn't prestigious enough to seat even a third of what IMS could fit. It's not prestigious enough to get a full car field nowadays. Maybe this year, I haven't checked the entry list, but maybe this year, just because it's the return, it'll probably get a decent crowd this year. It'll probably get a decent rating this year. The racing might actually be decent. But come 2025 and beyond, is that going to stick around? because I have over 15 years of evidence to suggest otherwise. And then if the fans don't show up again, if the racing sucks again, if all of this happens again, NASCAR's going to what? They're going to take it off the schedule. Maybe go back to the road course. Or in my opinion, what I've been saying for years, go to IRP. Go to the short track. We want more short tracks. We're in the Indiana area. Go to IRP. It would look better on television because there's not that many seats. And the racing, I guarantee you, would be better. And maybe not with the next gen, but I guarantee you it has a better chance of succeeding. But we're back here at the Oval, and before the first laps, even in practice, are going to be run, there's already talks that they're going to get rid of the Brickyard 400 again. That tells me NASCAR is not confident in the Brickyard 400 sustaining long term. That tells me IMS isn't confident in that. I'm not confident in it. I'm going to be honest with you, because the fans don't want it. It's the same thing with Bristol Dirt. They didn't want another concrete race because they didn't show up. But then they take it away and they start complaining. It's the same thing here with the Brickyard 400. I mean, let's be honest here, folks. If the Brickyard 400 this week is a snoozer, if the Brickyard 400 this week doesn't look good on television, if the attendance for the Brickyard 400 isn't as up to par, would any of you really be surprised? And do not tell me yes, because I guarantee you're lying to me. Because again, I have years of evidence to go back on. The sport's not even confident in the Brickyard 400. So what are we doing? You're not confident in your crown jewel? I don't blame them. It hasn't been successful. I'm of one of the opinion that I prefer the road course over the oval, because at least it looks better on TV and it's more exciting. Oh, the prestige. So what? Y'all didn't care about the prestige before. Why would you care about it now? What have you done for me lately? That is the motto of sports. That's what it should be. What have you done for me lately? The Brickyard 400 for me lately has done nothing. And I used to live 20 minutes from the Speedway. My family lives 20 minutes from the Speedway. What have you done for me lately? The Brickyard 400 has not done anything for us lately. It has been a snoozer. I hope it's better, because I never want to see bad racing, but I wouldn't be surprised if the race turns out to be a dud. And if we're going to keep it on the schedule because of tradition, folks, it's time we open our eyes and we actually need to grow the sport. Staying at a track that isn't meant for stock cars, staying at a track that when you watch on TV and you have to explain to people why the grandstands look empty, to go to a track where now you have to explain to people why did the race disappear for a couple years, that's not enough to warrant staying on the schedule because of tradition. That kind of talk is how you don't grow sport. So we'll see how the Brickyard does. Again, I'm not the biggest fan of it. I hope it does well, but I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't. I think NASCAR is starting to brace for that. And I'm just going to say this, if the Brickyard turns out to not work out, I told you so. And that'll do it for today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed tuning in. Thank you guys so much, as always. If you guys want to follow us on our social medias, follow us at Talkin Track Show on both X and Instagram. Follow us on Remix Sports Media as well on X and Instagram. But that's going to do for us here, folks. We're going to wave the checkered flag. This is Talkin Track here on Remix Sports Media.